Hi. Oh, wow. Great. More people. Fantastic. So this is the first time I'm giving this presentation. Might be a little hot on the landing. We have a lot of material to cover. I speak fast sometimes and less others. So we're going to try to keep a good pace and get through things. Please try and keep some questions towards the end, or I may not be able to make it through, but happy to answer them. So we're here to talk about analytics. Who currently uses Google Analytics? Show of hands. All right. I went into Google Analytics yesterday and I saw there were like 7 tabs that said beta on them all of a sudden. And I was like, oh no, more stuff. I don't know about you, but it kind of stresses me out. So I'm here to impart upon you some lessons that I have learned, and hopefully they will be helpful to you. And there'll be some resources at the end as well. But first, some stats, some analytics. Most recently, now of course, these all come from Google because our analytics won't tell us this. Only Google knows when you're searching by voice on your Google phone. But last they said, about 20% of all the queries on Google are coming in through voice, which I think is pretty interesting. And of those, almost a fifth are for local content. And all in all, the internet now is populated by a bunch of automatons, websites talking to websites, and bots crawling websites, including Google itself. And there's a little bit less human interaction. I think these are really interesting statistics. They start to conjure ideas in my mind. And that's kind of what I want to talk a little bit more about today too, is why are analytics important? Important to me. Why might they be important to you? But first, a little bit about who I am, where I'm coming from. My name is Andrew Malice. I'm the CEO of Calamuna. I was on my Facebook feed, and 2 weeks ago today, we were throwing a goodbye party in Toronto to move out here to come to Stanford, where my wife did her MFA. And while she was here, I was involved in the community before starting my agency, Calamuna. We are an organization that works with mission-driven organizations. A lot of them are higher education. Stanford branding policies don't allow me to show your logo. We also work we're respectful partners, obviously. With a lot of nonprofits, many of which are in the Bay. We're doing the Fast Track website right now, which is kind of exciting. We're based in Oakland. And we're really keen on sharing what we know, learning from you. We get involved in all kinds of events like these. This one was at the UN. You may notice peers in these photos from bad camps and elsewhere. We also like to activate the community. A couple years ago in New Orleans, we threw a funeral for Drupal 6 and organized a New Orleans jazz style procession through the city. It was a beautiful thing. Trees came, there were a lot of talks and speeches. Drupal 6 was like a really important moment. It was a great professionalization for Drupal, and people had worked on it for many, many years. And having a bit of a ceremony and some pomp to say goodbye to it was, I think, more touching than I thought it was going to be at the time, but it was fantastic. We also are really trying to put our values first, and we've been transforming our booth presence at conferences to divert landfill, and instead of producing swag, we've been donating money to charity, but in a way that activates the community itself. So we can talk about why we're here. These conferences are great. We're going to talk a lot about the how, but we're focused on all the technical bits because there's a purpose behind it. And I think that's really important. It's what binds us. It's what creates community. And so at Badcamp this year, we donated money to 3 organizations that our team decided they wanted to support: the ACLU, the EFF, and Planned Parenthood. And for every postcard that someone wrote to an elected representative, we donated some money to that cause. And then at DrupalCon this year, we planted trees for every person who came to our booth. We planted about 450 trees to help reforest some of the California wildfires work here. But all right, we're here to talk about analytics and again, about the why. Like, why does all this matter? I think it's important, especially when you're slugging through hard problems. There needs to be a purpose. Well, why would we want to invest in analytics? Why might you want to invest in analytics? Motivated to understand how to create better outcomes. And in order to do that, and when we can do that, then we can empower stakeholders to control their destiny. They can make better decisions using data. Really though, I have this like insatiable desire to make measurable improvements on how much good we're doing. I want to know that we're doing better and better. It feels good, but are we really having an impact? Are the sites that we're making really doing what they're supposed to be doing? How do we know that? Are we asking the right questions, and how can we continue to improve upon those things? Now, I don't know if any of you have seen this little Netflix documentary. It's really fantastic. But pairing with this, I'm not your guru on this. I have learned a lot from our senior analyst, Vadim, and I have tried to ingest a lot of this, and it's a challenge for me to give this talk, but I think it's a good place when you have a lot of questions in your own head to create some empathy and understand where people are coming from. So it's a bit of a challenge for me, and I hope you'll be along in the ride for me. All right, well, how does this all turn out? Like, let's just take a look at what we can do with analytics to help drive some storytelling and some change. You may have seen some heat maps before. They can be somewhat meaningful. They can start to present a little bit of there's three different maps here. One is a click map, one is a movement map, and the other is a scroll map. So on the right, it's like how much the hotter it is, the more people see it, and not everyone makes it all the way down to the cool parts. At the bottom of the page, this is a typical pattern. It's on every website. It doesn't tell you as much. But in the middle, you'll see that there's like a lot of hovering over a lot of things. This was a website we did for the American Foundation for the Blind. And so it really showed that there was really, people were engaging, kind of moving around quite a bit more than we had seen on other websites. And it started to like speak to how we were going to do the new information architecture. So analytics can be really useful at understanding what's working before you make a change. It's not just about refinements later. Google's got this really neat little plugin called Page Analytics, which you can download, and it'll connect to your analytics account and then throw overlays all over your page and show you what percentage of the links people are clicking on. It's super easy to use. And in this case, we found that there was this button, Make a Gift, which I think the university really wanted people to press, but no one did. 0% of people pressed it. It doesn't look like a button. It's poorly designed. And this is a really compelling story that can motivate some change. And some change towards an end, which is useful. But analytics aren't all dependent on Google, right? There's a lot of things that you can do and you can hack together. In this case, we took some data, a list of people with addresses, and we reverse geocoded their addresses and plotted them on a map and created some density maps. And what became apparent for this university was that all the it was for like a clinical practice at a clinical practice, is that all these people who are going there to have medicine practiced upon them were all over the place. Their addresses weren't in the Bay. They hadn't changed their addresses. They were still at their parents'. So they weren't getting mail, they weren't getting communication, they weren't in touch with the university. And they wouldn't have seen this if we hadn't like kind of just taken another look at what was normally just like a long list. So it's an opportunity. And sometimes you don't get the information you need. You have to measure it yourself. Don't be afraid to go out there and do an old-fashioned survey. Here was one we did before redesign that really showed that if you are a staff member, you're going to the site, staff members are orange. You're going to the site once a month, but very few of them are going, but once a week, the undergrads are going a lot more. So if you want to have a really big announcement on the website for faculty, it's probably not going to be very effective. So that kind of behavior and understanding of that user behavior is a powerful tool. But analytics can be pretty daunting when you log into Google. Hard to parse, hard to know where to find things. And there's some new technologies that are becoming more and more popular that can aggregate that data and present them in more meaningful and consumable formats. These are dashboards. Google has one called Google Data Studio. And we make some of these to like not have people need to hunt for things. Just put everything in one place and you can make a few different pages and reports and things like that. There are other tools around this. I'm giving another talk tomorrow at 3 p.m. to dive deeper into this because it's really fascinating. I like dashboards. Really, the analytics are going to help you understand what works and what doesn't, so you can adjust your approach to your audience and have a greater impact. Right? That's what we all want. I know this talk is 201, Analytics 201. We're going to get to 201, but I just want to make sure we're along on the ride. So I'm going to start with a couple 101 things, just to make sure we're on the same page. Like, what is analytics? I've never really thought too much about it. I just think it's a thing, analytics, yeah, and it's Google Analytics, but no. Analytics is about discovery, interpretation, communication, to create meaningful patterns in data. But digital analytics is a little bit different. It encompasses the collection, measurement, analysis, and visualization, interpretation of digital data, illustrating user behavior on websites, mobile sites, and mobile applications. So it's a little more narrow. Some of the examples we were showing earlier weren't exactly digital analytics, but they were more broadly analytics. The rest of this talk is going to be focused on digital analytics. It's a very important question. Why do you have a website? What is it supposed to do? I think a lot of people look at analytics and they start there and they think, okay, what can I do with this thing? If you just stop to think for a minute, like, what is your website trying to accomplish? It makes navigating analytics a lot easier. I want my website to result in higher, it's a place where people can come and learn about our program, or it's a place where they can come and download information, or they can participate in a conversation. And then once you think about things with that lens, it becomes a great filter. All right. A little 102 before we get to 201. Users, sessions, and page views. These are this is terminology that you'll see in analytics. I'll use a little metaphor of a shopping mall to explain these terms and how they tie together. So if you were to go to a mall or maybe two different malls, you go to some stores, you buy some things. You walk in the door, you travel in the mall, maybe you go to the food court, then you go to the electronics store. On your website, that person is a user, and every time they go to a mall, which is basically your one particular website, that's like a session. Every time they go to a place in the mall, that's like a page view. Users, during a session, visit pages, multiple pages, each page gets a view. Overall, they're spending time on your website, and there's a lot of things that a lot of metrics you can use to measure the quality of their experience. And one of them is time on your site. The longer you're in the mall, the more likely you are to buy something, maybe, or get hungry and have to go to the food court. But there's other things as well. 201, yes, part of the matter. All right, session. So this was something that I learned. I didn't know it worked this way. All right, so a session begins when a user visits your website for the first time and it loads the tracking code that you've got on your website. Each session is unique to a browser on a device. Now, there are some technologies that will let you track across devices. So if someone is like on their laptop and then they go visit the same website on their phone, they don't show up as two unique users. But for the most part, that's typically how it works. If you open a website in Firefox and then you open it up again in Chrome, those are two different sessions, even though you're on the same computer. Every 30 minutes, a new session starts, or it ends. So if you were to go to a web page, close it, and then go back an hour later, that's a new session. That's, and sometimes people get busy, right? You know, like, I'm gonna read this thing, and you put it aside, and you come back to it. So you gotta keep that in mind a little bit when you're looking at all of your session data. But this is really the epiphany for me. Is like Google Analytics has no way of knowing how long someone has been on your website when they visit the last page. So say you go in, using the mall metaphor again, you know, you walk into the like electronics store, you go into the clothing store, the food court, and then you leave, and you spend a long time eating your meal, 20 minutes. Well, as soon as you leave the last page of your website, like you're not there, you're not tracked anymore. So you could have been reading that last article for half an hour, but it doesn't count. So if I visit 2 pages, and the first page I'm on it for like 5 seconds, and then the next page I'm on it for an hour, it's gonna think I was there for 5 seconds. So sessions are useful, but they don't really demonstrate user intent. What are they trying to achieve, right? And how do we measure user intent? Because we want to be purposeful in our web applications. We want to focus on goals. Goals can be used to measure the success of a campaign and track progress and allow you to bring design changes and do A/B testing or whatever it is you want to do to help achieve your goal, push people towards it. You can create some of these yourself, but there's also this thing called the solutions gallery, which you can Google, and it'll give you all these kinds of things you can import into your analytics account, dashboards, reports, all these other things. It's really rich. It can get like, you can get like downloaditis a little bit, but there's some good stuff in there. And there's lots of like articles and guides that give you best of all these things. Goals are important. Let's dive a little bit more into them. What are they? What might they be? Here's some example goals. We have a contact us page. We want people to email us. All right, let's track that. How many conversions did we get? How many people emailed us over the last 7 days? 68, fantastic. How many files were downloaded? How many people logged in? How many people shared what we're doing on social? How many people played our video? You know, once you can determine what these goals are and how they're going to connect to the benefits your organization is going to see, then you can set them up in analytics and you can organize a program around them. If you have a kind of cart checkout deal, now I know it's not as prominent for all of higher ed, but there are donation frameworks in place. You want to know if people are getting to that final step in that commerce transaction. You can track things in this sort of funneled way. There's a vertical expression on a horizontal slide, so it's a little small. But I'll tell you how you can see this visualization in higher fidelity later, and I'll post the slides as well. But about 2,000 people came in to the cart. Some of them left. Some of them went through billing, payment. There's a bit of attrition that happens, and you can visualize all of this. You can see where people are going and start to make some more informed decisions about where in the flow you know, things are working or not. And if you do have commerce, there is this thing called enhanced e-commerce, which is an additional thing that's not free, you have to pay for, but it is worth it because you can get these similar types of reports, and they're horizontal, so they fit better on slides, and I like them a lot more. And then you know, you can hook it all up. Now, what we found is a lot of the time you've got there are many different technologies that are coming together to create this experience, and it's not just the website. So you're connecting with a third-party service, you're going off-site to another thing. It is a challenge that we address to tie these things together. And occasionally, like, we'll work with some of those vendors that didn't implement their code properly, so it can't be tracked. But because this is the kind of story that you want to be able to tell, and ultimately what can motivate decision making. There's a nice little feature called segments in analytics. It lets you customize different views on your data and store them. It's got these kinds of expressions that you can connect together and answer questions that are specific to your particular set of interests. And it lets you narrow more into like one particular segment of your audience instead of just looking at things really broadly. So maybe you want to know what's happening with mobile traffic. You want to know what's happening for a specific age demographic and identifiable gender in California. And all of these are like opt-in numbers, and this kind of data is getting less and less easy to get because more and more people opt out. But for those that do, you are getting a sort of segment, and it can provide a little bit more insight into user behavior. And you can add these at any time. They'll just apply. All right, who's concerned about their bounce rate on their website? Yeah. Okay. So what is a bounce rate? It's when someone just views a page and they leave, and really it doesn't matter how long they're on that page. So increasingly, people don't just go to your homepage and start looking around for stuff. They go to Google, they find something, and then they get it, and then they leave. And that's amazing. You've done a great job at providing semantic markup so that your information is indexable and searchable and people can get exactly what they need. And they're happy, but they've bounced. So maybe you shouldn't worry so much. Maybe you're doing a great job. There's other things to worry about. I think we want to focus on goals and conversions and optimize for that. And the bounce rate's kind of secondary, so don't sweat it. Oh yeah, and the other thing that I learned is bounce rate is excluded from other time-based metrics in Google Analytics. So that means say you have a really high bounce rate, it's 70%. And then you're looking at other reports, it's only calculating those reports based on that other 30% that hasn't bounced. So again, if if you have a website where people are accessing a long tail of content through Google, other reports can also get kind of skewed a little bit when you're looking at time-based stuff. Views are cool. I'll give you some tips on how to set up some views. When you first install your Google Analytics, it gives you this view called All Website Data. It's all-encompassing. It's something you should change right away. A view only collects data at the point of instantiation. So it's hard after the fact to change what's happened to a view. Every account has multiple properties like a website, right? And inside the website, you can have multiple views. What is a view? Well, we recommend creating 3 views for every property. A master view, a test view, and a raw data view. The raw data view is like your backup in case anything goes wrong with the stuff that you're messing with. The test view is where you can go in and test things out. Surprise. And it's also a place where you can shoot traffic from your staging and local host environment so it's not polluting your live data. The master view is your working view. It's where you're going to set up all of your baseline filters and modifications and the things that are going to give you the most accurate data set. Filters, which I just mentioned, are great because they get rid of things you don't want, but they also get rid of them forever. You can't get them back. So you want to be careful, and that's why you have a master view in case you've accidentally filtered out some data. It's like a sieve. It's not going to make it through the sieve. It's not the same as what we were looking at earlier with a segment. It's not just like a query that's going to give you a subset of data. It's actually eliminating data. But that's good. You want to eliminate bad data. You want to eliminate bot data. There's this little box that says exclude all hits. I love hits. From known bots and spiders. It is something you should enable generally, unless you have a good reason not to, but it isn't enabled by default on all your views. Other filters that you can apply, which can be useful, might be excluding internal site traffic. You're working on the website, maybe you want to exclude your IP from the traffic because you're hitting it quite a lot and you're skewing all your traffic data, all your data. You may want to remove query parameters that are polluting your reporting and creating duplicate page reports. Site search is something you need to manually set up as well in analytics. This is typically how you do it for Drupal sites. So there's a query parameter that comes in And then you want to strip that out, be able to find like what people are looking for. Search is really great. It's like one of the best ways to understand what user intent is because they're looking for something on your website. You can, to some degree, know what they're searching for when they get to you from Google, but really, like, this can help you improve how your search is working. So set it up. It's not on by default. Who here does like outreach, email, like is trying to drive traffic to their website, sending social media, all that other stuff? Do you have a lot of direct traffic when you look at those sources? If you do, it may be because you're not using UTM links or UTM parameters properly. They help Google Analytics understand where your traffic is coming from and what campaign it belongs to. Here's a basic anatomy of a UTM parameter. You've likely seen them. They're query strings followed by a little data bits. It tells you what the source is, where's it coming from, how is it getting here, and why is it getting there? These are some like pretty basic questions. And when we create a campaign, we can set up multiple sources around the same campaign and understand if people are arriving more from social or from the newsletter or from a blog article or whatever it is that we're using to propagate our message. And that can help us to narrow in on like where we're being most effective and double down on that instead of maybe putting a lot of resources towards a particular channel that isn't as effective for us to achieve our goals. I highly recommend a UTM strategy and a coherent strategy and one that can be understood and propagated across the organization. I'll talk a little bit more in the next slide about some tips and tricks around that. But here's sort of the hierarchy of UTMs. The campaign is most important. There are generators that let you store all of those UTM links so you can understand like what the name of the campaign is. You don't start up a new campaign like alternate spelling and that, and maybe you've got like there's some drop downs, you can pre-populate some things. There's a bunch of spreadsheets out there that'll do it. There's some free spreadsheet templates and then you just create an entry and there's some drop downs and you customize it that way. And then you can track your use of how it's all been done and create a culture around it. Google has a generator you can use. It's pretty good, but it doesn't store anything that you've done in the past. And you want to establish like a common practice, right? Always make sure that your parameters are lowercase. If they're uppercase, they will be differentiated. It'll look at like two different things. It's like your HTTPS and your HTTP, they're like two different websites, right? You gotta like redirect. Don't use spaces between words, use dashes, don't use ampersands, they make things funky. And then if you're using Google Ads, don't make UTMs for them, it's all hooked up, it happens natively. You don't need to make UTMs for those ads. Also, some people are like really granular with how they're reporting back on their channels for social. They might go channel Twitter, but it can be a little bit easier to report back if you broadly characterize your channel as social and then use the source to specify if it's like Facebook or Twitter or whatever. It just groups a little bit better. That's how email works as a source, as a medium, sorry. And then make sure that your naming conventions are consistent across all your sources. Time check. All right. Search Console. All right. Who uses Search Console? Yes. Who doesn't know what Search Console is? That's good. Search Console is cool, but it used to be called Webmaster Tools, so maybe you've heard of that. They renamed it, rebranded it. Google likes to do these things. And you can connect your Search Console account to your Google Analytics account. It's really quite easy, but then you start to get additional data. Not only do you get like reports through Search Console on broken links and all that kind of stuff, but you start to understand organic search performance better. That's where you get that intent of like what someone has actually searched when they get to your website. It's like, what were those search terms they used to find us? Unless you connect those two things, you won't know how they got to your site until they're actually there. This can help you as well improve SEO. It'll give you some reports on keywords and how those keywords are ranking right now across other spaces. So, that gives you a sense of like maybe how far down the search page you were when they found you, how many times they had to, how they had to refine your search. But Search Console is a bit of a laggard. Like they are 48 hours behind all the time. So don't expect live data, and they're only going to store the data for about 16 months, which is a pretty decent amount of time. But still, that means you can't kind of report year over year for some of these things. But this will give you a lot of power. Google Tag Manager, yes. So we ubiquitously use Google Tag Manager over Google Analytics. There is a Google Tag Manager Drupal module. Does anyone use Google Tag Manager right now on their Drupal website? Yes. Does anyone use Google Analytics, the Google Analytics module, but not the Google Tag Manager? Okay, cool. So why might you want to think about using Google Tag Manager? Well, it does some amazing things. First, when you want to make some changes, you don't need to push code all the way up to production. It lets you go in and log in through an interface and make some modifications to like how all this stuff is tracking and all that setup. Why would you want to do that? Well, there are third-party tags. Sometimes someone asks you to like add a tag on your website because they want to track a thing, they want to add like a Facebook tracking pixel. They want to, then you go, oh, find the code and you put it on there, and should I put it in the header or the footer? And they tell you these things. They always tell you to put it in the header, right? But like, oh, that makes my site slower or whatever. So Google Tag Manager lets you load it and manage those tags. I mean, it's a tag manager, right? In there, and Bob's your uncle. Why is that great? Well, all those tags in GTM are loading asynchronously, which means you're not waiting for the page. It's not blocking. If you put all of those different scripts on your site, like it's got to load them all and your site's getting slow. This way, you're just making one call to GTM and then it's going to load them up and your site's going to load faster, which is fantastic. But also, you can turn these things on and off really quickly. You can do a little experiment. You can use Crazy Egg or Hotjar. The heat maps that I was showing earlier in Click Maps, that was Hotjar. And they have a free offering that will track for the first 1,000 page views. So you can throw that on your home page, turn it on, and then turn it off so that it continues to load a little faster and you're not pushing code up to production and scheduling all these deployments. It can enable marketers that have some level of sophistication to do that kind of thing or others. You can create triggers that can track particular actions on the website, and that can feed into your analytics. So all this is adding power and additional dimensions and richness to what users are doing on your website, things that analytics can't natively track. Analytics doesn't know what kind of links people are clicking on your website, but Google Tag Manager can figure that out and pass the information over to analytics. So is someone clicking a mail to link? Are they downloading a PDF? Are they downloading an Excel? Are they clicking an outbound link? You won't know any of that from analytics. If that's important to you, then you can track it here. There are there's like a UI to do that, but you can also create a data layer, which is a little more efficient because when you're using the UI, you're telling it to look for things in the DOM, and so it's a little slower. But then the data layer, like some JavaScript, you can throw on top. It's going to be a little bit more explicit, some developer action. Here's what part of the interface looks like for tags, some things that you can do, some magic. A lot of this is like stuff you can just install really quickly. You don't need to write it all up. You download and install them. There's some magic out there for tracking videos. Google Tag Manager has this one, I think it's listed in here. YouTube, yeah, Lunametrics has this YouTube tracking plugin. You can see how much of a video someone is seeing, half of it, 3/4, they watch the whole thing. And otherwise it'd be pretty complicated for you to be like figuring all this stuff out on your own. You get some download files, email clicked. A lot of these are just kind of inherited. You can see they're coming from, they're going to go back into analytics. And then, yeah, that's kind of how that works. This one first. Okay, so another tip, Google Analytics has got this demo account. You may not want to be messing with like your website's analytics data itself or applying filters now that you know that they're destructive. And if you're creating new views, you're going to have to wait for data to populate those. Also, maybe your website doesn't get a ton of traffic. Maybe you don't currently do e-commerce, but you're thinking about it. If you go to this URL, you will be invited to gain access to all of the actual data that's on the Google store, which is kind of amazing that they've made all of that practice so transparent, but that data is really quite rich, and you can play with it, and you can see how they've set all of their things up, how they have their different views, and you can experiment with it. You have like all this wealth of information that you can play around with and do it safely. So I recommend this. It's a great way to poke around and a great way to learn. And then also, yeah, as promised, there is a little PDF that put together that's like 3 pages of some like bullet points, tips and tricks. Each tip has a little link to a blog article out there that explains more about it and how to do these things. But there's a little link here, the bit.ly link, which redirects you to a URL that has a UTM link on it. And then you'll just get a PDF that's on our website. And that is that. This is me. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you have questions and you want to ask them now, this is a great time. A little bit faster than I thought. Thoughts, feelings, recommendations, yes.
Can you give us some examples of how you apply this and more of a discovery made and the value of what you see?
Of putting more energy into analytics, or into
specific examples. We did this, we thought this, and we discovered this, and the client was so happy.
Right. Okay. Yes, I can give you an example. So we're working with a client that's they have a really long tail of content. They do a lot, they have newsletters, they do a lot of newslettering, and they're a big change promoter in the environmental space. And so a lot of what they do is thought leadership, but they also run conferences. Those conferences have, they sell tickets to those conferences. And looking into their setup, we found that they weren't able to create that journey to the third-party event service, which is Cvent. So it just kind of died. They wouldn't know what happened if people went into that space and came back or whatever. It just like, it would die there. And on the other end, they would have statistics about how many tickets they were selling, but it had no connection to the behavior on the website. So we went in, and through Google Tag Manager, we were able to create events, and we worked with Cvent to have the code placed on their instance. And we were able to then create that more complete journey, which gave them a lot of insight, and now lets them think more adeptly about how they're managing campaigns and how effective they are, because they can see for every UTM link that they send out, what the dollar value that translates for them in ticket sales is.
That leads to more questions and more good outcomes.
Of course. Yeah. Questions beget questions. And ultimately, I think it's, but that's kind of freeing. It opens you up to experimentation and risk taking, right? And that's where you can innovate and you can succeed. Otherwise, you can get trapped in like these spaces of fear. Like, oh, if we change this, maybe you know, maybe this, maybe that, but you can tell like more quickly this way. And some things can be quite surprising. You know, you can try a little experiment and it happens to work, and you can prove it and prove it quickly. Yes. Yes.
Several universities around the world that literally copy our site.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we're getting traffic
Right.
to the University of London. So I had to set up a filter in Google Analytics and said, holy count the filter where the URL is actually Stanford.edu.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a common thing that happens, and sometimes it isn't necessarily through flattery, but there are malevolent. I mean, not through imitation, but there are like malevolent forces out there that are trying to like spam your analytics in a way, and they're randomly choosing like UA codes, and they're injecting themselves in there, and because they know you're looking at your account, and they're trying to get you to click through to like, oh, I really got a lot of hits from this place, and then you click through to it, and they're trying to trap you that way. So, so that can throw your stuff off. That's where that checkbox of the bots and filters came up. It used to be that you had to write all these filters manually, and you have like these long regexes you had to put in there, and then they kind of like compacted it, so you do a lot less of that. But there's the use case that you've put forth is still like one you need to handle manually for sure.
Let's say you've been using Google Analytics for a number of years, and you want to set up reviews.
Right.
What do you do with your current view?
Mm-hmm.
Does that become your green master? Or does that become your raw data? How do you do it?
That's a great question. I think ultimately, if you only have one view, that's the all website view, you probably want to turn that into your raw view and then clone it right away. Now you'll know that your data might be skewed before a certain point if you have filters applied to it. And then you would take those filters off. But otherwise, you'd be starting from scratch with a raw view, which may not be as desirable. It won't give you that same snapshot in time and perspective. But it can be a little infuriating that you're not able to, you know, just get things going straight. Another option can be, and this is something that one of our clients did opt for, was that they just had so many issues. They're just going to set up a whole new like UA code and start from scratch to just know how the foundation is all built, and maybe they'll have a little bit of overlap between those two pieces, but it'll be like a new era. So that's also an option, is you can start over and set up a new UA code. Any questions, thoughts, feelings? Analytics. Just maybe a shout out to like other analytics packages out there. You know, Google is not, I mean, I know they're close by and everything, we're friendly, but there are other options out there for you, and so they're increasing in prominence. I forgot what it's called. There was this thing called Piwik. It's been renamed. We used it quite a bit during Occupy. We didn't want to have like a lot of tracking, and there's an increasing number of analytics options out there that don't necessarily you know, give all your data away. Something that's also worth thinking about if you get into GTM and you're starting to do these things, there's a lot that you can do and you can pass into Google Analytics, but there are some privacy concerns. Like it is possible to shoot your user, like when someone's logged into your website, you can send their ID or their email over to analytics, so then you can track them individually. All of these things tend to violate not only the terms of service of Google itself, but likely the universities. So there's a lot of power, but with that power comes responsibility. So I just, you know, encourage you guys to think through some of those implications as well. We are trying to use this information in order to help individuals do what they do best, and like let's not get too creepy, right? Okay. Are we done? Yeah, okay, thank you.